So to get there, we've got to find out some ways that are effective for measuring and tracking performance within the system. And as I mentioned earlier, a lot of the most prevalent report we see that customers have developed to make an assessment of where they are with their adoption is an average login report. And this is obviously a very simplified version of that. But people have become very dependent on this as an indicator of whether the system is being used or not. But there's all sorts of problems with this type of analysis. So for example, let's presume that we're talking about an enterprise class salesperson that we're measuring here, someone who, yes, does log in the system, but they're managing very complex sales cycles, and let's just presume that accessing 4 to 5 times a day would be a pretty good usage pattern for these folks. Looks fine when we look at it that way, but if we start to split it up and look at that same view and we look at it across multiple days, what we see is, yes, we're averaging for some logins per day, but we've got a very lumpy usage pattern, and we've got a clear spike on Thursday afternoon, nothing happening really on Friday, a little bit of a buildup on Wednesday. But what that's indicating, by the way, is Friday is the reporting day. Friday is the day that forecast reports are due. So what's happening is everyone's logging in the system on Thursday to meet the needs of the managers, but they're not really using the system to make their lives any better. And as a result, they're not getting the value. And so a report like the one I showed you before that can really be misleading in terms of where we are as an organization. So what we do with a lot of our customers, in addition to just breaking things down into more of a daily averaged basis, is also start to look at other activities based on user roles within the system that we can report back on to really get a feel for where things are and also where the challenges are. So yes, it's nice to know that we have a challenge, but it's more important to know where those challenges are so we can start to put some ideas together on how to deal with them. So as an example, putting together daily object and activity tracking that gives us a view into what are people doing once they get into the system. And there's lots more of these, and Hillary can touch on a few of them later on in the conversation. We'd be also happy to have an offline conversation with anybody about some of the other reports that we've developed to help people get a better feel for where they stand. Machiavelli had an interesting quote here, and I think it's very true even in today's workplace, that really change management is really critical, right? And I think, I shouldn't say I think, what we've found over time working with our clients is that one of the fundamental challenges that new systems, particularly CRM systems, bring to the forefront is really the level of effort around working either inside the new system or outside the system in their status quo type environment. And it makes a lot of sense. So if I'm used to walking over to Deborah's desk on Thursday afternoon when I need a report and bringing a cup of coffee and sitting and chatting until she gets it done for me, that's, first of all, it's quick. It may not be fast in the long run, but it's quick at the time. When I know I need a report, I can walk over to her desk and I can ask for that report, and she's going to get it for me. It's comfortable. I know exactly what's happening. I can see Deb in front of me. I know that it's happened. I know I've done it before and been successful, so it's tested. As a result, I trust the process, right? It may not be the best thing. It's actually probably very counterproductive for Deb, and it may actually take me a lot longer than I realized getting that whole thing done, but it's what I've been doing. Whereas working inside of a CRM system may be a little bit foreign. It's unfamiliar in the sense that I might not know exactly where to go to produce the same results. Let's say if I had to work within a workflow environment in my CRM system, I may not know where exactly to start. It's going to take me a lot of time the first few times I do it. And it's going to be stressful because I'm probably going to make some mistakes. And even worse, I may actually generate a request that I think was successful, but I did something wrong, and it's now been sent out to the system and lost, right? So there's a lot of challenges. And what those users start to see is an environment where it's a lot more work to start to work inside the system, and they just feel like it's easier to operate in their standard status quo type environment. From a challenges perspective, inside the system, there's 5 fundamental areas that every organization has to look at around user adoption and trying to figure out the differences between the two. The first is data quality, right? And it's understanding, by the way, what benefit does working inside of the system present to working outside the system. So is the information I'm going to receive by working the system more reliable than what I would have gotten from Deb before? Is it going to be more timely? Because before, I was looking at Deb, and I presume she produced that at the moment I asked her. And is it predictable? Particularly if I'm in a managerial position where I'm rolling up or aggregating information from multiple people, how do I have, when I no longer have the opportunity to look across the desk at somebody and see how they're reacting to my questions, how do I get a sense for whether what I'm seeing in the system is accurate and reliable or not? From an analytics perspective, I'm amazed to this day at how many large organizations still are reliant on producing paper reports, even folks that have invested very heavily in highly complex CRM environments, but still have dedicated staff for producing paper reports. So, and they've developed systems to look at those reports in such a fashion that they feel it produces meaningful information. So we need to make sure that whatever they're seeing when they log into the system produces that same value for them, that same meaning when they can look at it and they can toggle it the way they need to get the information they want. It needs to be accessible. If it's going to take an executive more than 20 or 30 seconds to find what they're looking for from a report perspective, it's too long. They're going to lose interest rapidly, and they're probably going to move back to a system where they rely on an admin or somebody else to bring that information to them. And lastly, it needs to be actionable, right? It needs to be something where I can look at the information, I can make a decision, I can make something happen. And I think this is an area where CRM has real promise over a paper-based system or a non-integrated CRM environment, because we can develop tools that allow the executive to see something at a high level in aggregate form and then drill down very rapidly into specifics and make some decisions and communicate with the people that need to get things done. From a user interface perspective, it needs to be intuitive. If people have to keep asking questions about what did you mean when you said that word, that's going to be a real problem for them. It needs to make their life easier than it was in their prior environment, not add complication. And it needs to be customized based on who I am and what I do. I want to see things that are germane to me. I don't want to see things that, if I'm a salesperson, I don't want to see what the marketing people look at or what a customer service person looks at. I need to see what helps me get my job done. And we need to make sure that people understand they have the right training. They need to know what is expected of them by interfacing with the system. When do we need them to do what we're asking them to do? And lastly, why are we asking them to do these things at all? And a lot of times this isn't something that's considered as heavily as I think it needs to be. Human nature is to grant importance to those things that we feel are truly important and meaningful. And if people start to perceive that, for example, we've got a couple fields in a view that are make work or not really used on a regular basis, they don't assign any importance to that. And that in and of itself isn't so bad. The challenge is that is an insidious type behavior, and what starts to happen, we've seen a lot of times, is that dismissive attitude towards certain fields starts to move into other areas, and people start to grant less and less credence to the system overall. And lastly, from a business process perspective, it needs to model what's happening in the real world, right? If we're anything other than that, we're becoming an encumbrance to the process as opposed to a facilitator. It needs to add value. And lastly, it needs to be aligned to the way that we've got the organization structured, so that when I make a request in there for a new report, a new module, assistance with a proposal or pricing, that the system goes and hits all the right buttons internally to make sure that at the end of the process, I get what I was looking for. So in terms of addressing the process, we've pretty much made the case for the fact that for a lot of people, a new CRM system or an environment where they've had a new system for a while but they haven't gotten to a point of adoption yet, working in the outside system is less work. Working outside of the system is less work than it is to engage into the new CRM environment. So how do we affect that? Through a series of sticks and carrots, incentives and disincentives that are going to move people in the right direction and get us to where we want to be, where we've got the vast majority of people using the system on a regular basis.